And if I may, I am also stuck because I have all this world building in my current work in progress. And at first, I thought I would go with one book because that's the main default. Like, I'm trying to at least write one thing. Okay, I'm still there after how long has it been, Laura, since we know each other? A year and a half. So I'm still.
I think I started these back in like September, October, so it's been 6 months.
So yeah. So but I'm still because I think I started writing more the scenes when I had my baby girl, like really small, and in the middle of the night she had to be breastfeed, and then I couldn't go to sleep because I had this people talking to me, and I was like, oh, okay, I will go write it down so I could sleep, and then she would wake again, and then I was still not over with it. So yeah, but then at some point I was out of scene, so I just stopped. And then I picked those up again. I think it was with COVID or something. So I think it's about a year now that I'm trying to complete something and it's still not done. So, but I picked one, and I'm like, I'm going to finish at least the first draft of this thing, and then I'm starting to put ideas, and then it's a huge thing because it's a poly relationship, and they are many poly because it's like they are five, so that's so many people. So I'm like, okay. And then someone said to me, but what if you make 5 books? And I'm like, oh my god, that's what I needed. Like, I will make one book for each one, and the main female will have the last one where they all get together and happy ending. It will be perfect. But now I have the problem put to like create a series and have each of them have their moment and their stories, but also have a big arc. And now I don't know where to start, and I'm like, am I crazy?
Well, I don't think you're crazy. Life is complicated, and what you're trying to do here is sort of create a life in the middle of a world. I think you have this world, and it's got its political problems, and it's got its, and that sort of thing. You may have that too complex to start with. It sounds more like you're starting with book 5 instead of starting with book 1. So you need to think about spending more time ramping up the political conflict in the background of the story rather than have it full force from the very beginning. And that's not to say that you can't do it. Obviously, Divergent, Hunger Games, these stories, the world is already terrible.
Yes.
And you've got to live in it, and you've got to survive it, and you've got to change it. But even in the Hunger Games, she's living in that world and surviving it.
Yes.
She doesn't start changing it until the second book.
Yes.
The threads to change it start showing up in the first book, the Mockingjay pin, the connection with Rue, these types of things. So you can drop in those moments that say change is coming, but you can focus on the immediate plot, which is your first 2 characters getting through their immediate situation.
Yes. Okay.
And that may help, but you will want to think, probably you've got the full-blown timeline. You may want to back up to how did it begin? and ask
Yes.
that for your subplot.
Yes. Okay.
That may help you
Yes.
take
Because
it down.
that's my problem. Because I have what I thought would be the beginning of their the first meeting with the first guy, but then what the order I'm thinking of the book, he's not the first one she will meet. But now I'm like, so I have to create another meeting, and I don't know where to start. And like yesterday, I realized she can meet them separately, and I the meeting I have can still be happening, and she can meet the other one before and have it separate. It's logical. I'm okay. I'm okay. It's logical, but so I realized that it could work because again I'm a little sentimental about what I wrote, and I was just like, do I have to just throw everything I wrote because I'm almost 10K in what I have, but it's not. Uh, right now, I don't see how it would be usable. So I'm like, do I have to just throw everything and start again? And so yesterday I realized I might still be able to use what I have later on. So I'm like, okay, so I started a new document with a new title and a new thing. And I'm like, I'm starting all over. And if I can use something from the last one, I'll just have to copy paste. So, but then I have to start something and the page is blank. And I'm like, I don't
Well,
know where to start.
I mean, that's the other thing though, is unlike Julie and I, you're more of a pantser. For a series, and that's something that I for a series, you really need to adopt some plotter techniques.
Yes.
And you really need to say, this is the main plot for book 1. This is the main plot for book 2. And if what you turn out that what you've currently written is really the main plot for book 3, then that's what you say.
Yeah.
And then so in book 2, how do I get them there? So that's going to be the plot for book 2. And then plot book 1, how does this all start?
Okay. Yeah.
And and doesn't need to be 50 pages long. It
Yeah. No.
just might be a single page
Yeah.
where you're explaining the beginning of the political situation, the beginning of the personal situation, and you know the first major turning point. Because that's the other thing, is a series is really like a long story arc.
Yes.
So the first major turning point is really the end of book 1.
Yes.
And you have to decide, this is what the main plot is, and so that's going to be the overarching plot of the politics. What's its major turning point, and does the relationship happen inside of that time period, or and reach an HEA or an HFN, or does it slide a little past that, in which case you come up with an end tag for the book, that sort of thing. And then you move into book 2. But you may actually need to plan it out just a
Yes.
touch.
Yeah. So I did that. I took a just random discarded paper and just like said book 1 and the characters that are in what I'm thinking will be going on. Turn the page, book 2, the character that are in what I think will be going on. But I don't but and did that for the 5. So I have like somewhat of ideas for each, but so for each of the 5, but it's still a it's all messed up, and I cannot see the I cannot see the big arc, and I cannot see the small arc yet. So I'm still So I'm still struggling with that. And so yeah, and yeah. So
So
I
we'll
will go read what Revelyn said.
yeah, she said that she had to do something similar. She plotted her series and then started seeing it as one story and then set up the main points, then divided them into the books. Changed a lot of things, but all the time spent planning has actually made her it easier to see the structure.
Yes,
So
because I um this I don't know when was it, if it was Tuesday or this week. I printed ideas for uh series Bible. I search because there's plenty of website, and obviously it's and on every website it's like you have to adapt it to what you're writing, because every series is different and everything. So I was reading what people were doing as series Bible, and I was so I'm trying to see, because the first one, most of what I've seen is uh, paper in a binder and with separation and everything. But then I came across someone saying like, "Hey, I'm doing it on a private wiki link, and you can." And she was like, you need to be like in 2021 and get it on something that is cloud based, so you can access it easily from everywhere, and you don't have to worry if something is spilled on it. And I'm like, oh my god, what if what if my binders end up lost or something? But then yeah, so I'm thinking of doing this. So I will try to find templates of what
there
because
there
most
was one in OneNote. I knew of a guy who did one in OneNote. Had
okay.
character pages, had book pages, had plot pages, and then you link between the two as you
Mm-hmm.
make connections and stuff like that. So I knew one that did it in OneNote, but I think it was for an older version of OneNote, so it's like not useful much
Oh,
anymore. Um, but
because
a
most of what
wiki is another good one. The key thing is though, one of the problems with any of these forms of things is if you start writing on the page and you forget a character name, it's not going to link to the character if
yeah.
you put the wrong name in there. So to some extent, you have to sort of review your notes each time you plan to
Yes.
add something new to it.
Yes.
And
But
Evelyn is suggesting using Notion. I've heard other writers talk about Notion.
what is
I don't
Notion?
use it, but
yeah, Notion is let me
another free app. And I think you can use it on your computer, desktop, and on your phone. I don't know if you can link, I don't know if they link or whatever. But
Because I was thinking of making a Google Doc, because I'm working on Google Doc to do my writing. So but most of what I've seen for series Bible was more of the editing type, like it from what I've read, people use it after writing the first draft and thinking of like they have their first draft and then they go over their first draft to make sure there's no inconsistency with the second book. But from what I've seen, people it wasn't it's not used for plotting before the first one. So I'm not sure if I'm going in the right direction with that. Because is it the same? I guess it's the same. I guess it's the same template. Is it? Is there some difference between what you do before and what you use after the first draft?
Well, first draft is, I've said this before, it's you telling yourself the story. So you're going to notice the holes. You're going to notice the places where you could expand things. You're going to notice, and so the first draft can be written, I think, before you decide that something's going to be a series, because you will find the inspiration for the other series pieces to answer those questions, those holes, those things. And instead of a hole in the first book, you will end up with a small little nugget that you promise the reader in book 2 will be expanded on or explored or what have you. So you were talking about the fact that you have this meeting with the character early. In that meeting, you can just make it short, but you can add that little nugget that suggests there's going to be more with this person in the future. And then the later book, when it finally happens again and becomes a full-blown relationship, your reader will say, oh yeah, she first met this guy back in book 1, and yeah, timing wasn't right, because that's what happens in a lot of real life. I was watching Jeopardy last night, and some guy said he met her when he was 14. He let her go. 41 years to the day after their first date, they married. They've been married just over 2 years now.
Wow.
So, so it does happen. Life gets in the way, you move on, but you met someone way back then. And,
And I always said, if I have met my boyfriend in high school, we would never be together. Like, he told me things from high school that I'm like, there's no way we would have even be in the same room. Like, no way. Yeah. And because it would have been possible, because we have common friends. So we might have met before, but it never happened. But I know for sure that we wouldn't be together. But now it's been 12 years, so.
I've been with my husband 29 years, and I've learned a lot about his high school years. I've met high school friends of his and things like that. And we're both quite certain that had we known each other in high school, we would have turned our backs on each other.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah. And even our common friends are like, at first they were like, oh, nice, you have a relationship. And after a moment they were like, are you sure you want to like make life with him? Because like they knew him in high school, and they were like, are you really sure? Like, we are talking about the same man, right? And I'm like, yes, all is good.
Yeah. So so I don't see why you couldn't. Okay. Most people who plan a series before writing the first book are actually writing essentially standalone series. There's a common setting, a common theme, or a commonality in terms of each book. Like on one of our romance groups, there was Jim, and he was writing this Navy series, and it's all about women.
Yeah.
And but that's a series. He planned it out. The lead female in each series is a Navy officer, Navy ship.
Yes.
Okay. You can do that before you start writing book 1. Something like that, because while they might be friends, and you get these little crossover moments where friend 1 comes into friend 2's book, and that sort of thing. The plots are not tied together by one large arc.
Yeah, no.
Okay, now he could weave in a large arc.
Yes.
If, for example, he wanted
the army, the ship, or a war or something.
Those would be thematic. Yeah.
But say they're all gearing up for the same war effort. Or they all, they're all going to be deployed to Iraq for Desert Shield or whatever. So you have in the background, and this would be where it would apply to your world building. In the background, he would have things like, in book 1, she went back to her ship for a briefing, and they got some deployment orders, and that'll be in 6 weeks or in 6 months. And these are the things that she's got to button up and do, and that sort of thing. And then in book 2, different ship, different woman, but she gets a briefing on how her ship's going to provide support in the same event. And then by book 4, the ship that woman's on is actually, a week from deployment. They're all involved in the same build up to a war, but each person's story is isolated into their preparation for that war.
Yes.
So that may be the technique that you want to think about, is how does each pairing encounter the preparation for the big conflict, or the intersection with the big conflict. For example, the second part of the Star Wars stories, The Force Awakens, etc., did this a little bit better than the first 3. They ran into a rebel cell. This rebel cell was doing this. The Empire was doing this. They could see that there was a big conflict coming. But the first was concerned with this one focused conflict.
Yes.
Get through it. Then the repercussions from that led to, now we have this conflict and war is even closer. And so that might be the plotting that you're looking for there. And again, we started on this about being blocked. I think that's not being blocked. I think that's working out the problems that your brain has said, all right, I really need to spend some time working out these problems. And it's still writing. It just may not end up in a book. It's going to end up in your notes. But I think a lot of writing that we do doesn't end up in the book that readers see. I saw it was like a cross stitch, and it was a picture, the front picture, what your readers see.
Oh yeah.
And a very nice cross stitch picture. And then what the writer sees. It was a flip over of it, and all of the little ties in the way, where the string, where the
threads crossing up, going up higher.
It got tied off, got knotted off, got connected to another thread so that it, 2 would pull through. And so it looks like this little knotted mess. And sometimes I think we get caught up in the fact that from our perspective, it looks like a knotted mess.
Yes. Yes.
And you can't figure out how to make it look like the front. You're not realizing that all the knotted mess work is just what's going on. And then once you get it done, it'll look pretty. And I think the interesting thing too, that I think a series Bible would help with, of course, I've never written a series, so I've read them, and I do understand. I'm sorry, I put some clear nail polish on my nails. So I have a nail that's splitting, and so it's like I'm having a difficult time with this. I'm trying to keep stuff on it. But anyway, so the age, what happens. So is that the series Bible, to Laura's point, does help you keep sort of thinking about whether there is that sort of that there's a continuous theme, and that there may be an arc, like going to war, but each of them is standalone in their own right. But the series Bible helps you remember what happened in prior stories, because most story, so that you make sure that when you reference it, because most series, I've read lots of books in series, and they often add little tidbits in there for the reader who hasn't read the prior ones, because they want the book to be standalone and they don't want someone to discard it and say, well, I don't know this. Like I like to read Lee Child's Jack Reacher books. You can read every one of those standalone. I, however, because I'm anal, OCD, and have a note thing in my iPhone that tells me what the next book is, the next few books,
Yeah.
like, or whatever. I'm not reading them right now because I'm doing something else, but I also love the Mitford series, which is this sweet preacher in North Carolina and the little town, but there's these things that stay the same. Mrs. So-and-so makes the orange marmalade cake. You better not say it's somewhat the wrong person in book 4.
Or that
so
she doesn't make orange marmalade cake. She made
Right.
a lemon pie.
Right, exactly. So you have to, so the Bible actually is sort of like it's almost your rule book in a way. I mean, because the Bible is a rule book. And so, if you think about it that way too, so, and you really should write it ahead. I mean, I've thought about my 1920s novel, me being able to riff off of it and write another book, but maybe focus on the sister. But there'd be totally standalone books, but there'd be a lot of characters in common. And then I would need a character Bible to make sure that everyone stayed true. And so, and your setting is also a character, so the house they grew up in, all those kinds of things. So all of that. I mean, I'm not sure I'm going to do that. I'm not sure I want to do research on the Great Depression. But it really does help, because I think that I'll give you a weird example. This is not a series, but I just read Kristen Hanna's book, The Four Winds, and I really like her books. But you have to remember, I mean, even in a single book, you have to remember what you've already said. I mean, she said twice within 30 pages, because I got a steel trap here for a lot of stuff, and especially words. And she described the churches that they went to church, and this was the Dust Bowl, Texas Panhandle, and the blacks had their churches, the whites had, and she mentions the Mexicans, and the Mexicans have had their church for 100 years. She said it 30 pages later when she talked about going to church. This practically the same wording, and it like jumped out at me glaring, because I remembered her saying she didn't need to say it twice.
No.
But she'd forgotten, and it got past the editor, and all of that. And I know that's really minor, but you stack several of those up, and
no, exactly. So
and a series could make you make those sins, like magnify them.
Yes, because the way I'm seeing it, like I've said, the idea was one book at the beginning, but now when I see each character, and I wanted, because at first I wanted one book with one story plot and some little subplot with each of them, so they have each their own relationship before getting to the poly one. So but then those little things underneath, I was like, okay, well, they each have their own, so that makes 4. But okay, so but this one will be like so big, and then this one is big too, and then this one is big too, and this one will have to continue, like I have to start with first getting this character in, and then because throughout the thing we have to, I wanted to get that thing going on. So I was like, it cannot get inside just one book, or it will be like.
Can I make a suggestion though?
Yes.
Maybe you should finish this book and then decide whether you like it enough that you want to write more about the other characters. I mean, because then you can create your series Bible after you've done your first book, write it as a standalone, then create the series Bible if you want to jump ahead. Otherwise, you're going to keep starting stuff, Trixie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Again, that's why
I want to read your book. I mean, you got to finish it.
But that's one of the reasons why I think if you finish it, then you'll notice what holes there are and could be expanded. But if you don't don't have an arc yet. And that means that maybe this book gets finished, and if you realize it's actually book 3, then it sits in a drawer and a folder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard
your others-
people in RWC. I mean, and now and all of these romance groups. I've heard someone in every one of these groups say that. I finished book 2, but I'm writing book 1. Because they realized they needed to.
Yeah, they realized
They
that
need a
there's
prequel.
prequel information there. There's other things prior to that story that they were really interested in, and things like that. So it's a perfectly acceptable thing to not publish your first one first,
Yeah.
especially if it's not the first book.
Yeah. I'm going to think about it because every plot, every even / plot I have are not equivalent, and some are smaller, and some are things that needs to be developed on a whole book, but some are really small. So I kind of have to move them around and piece them to somehow fit. So
Yeah, but I think once you have this first one, and again, it doesn't have to be all be the end of victory. A war is many battles,
yes.
and so you can have one intermediate battle, and they finish that, and that's the end of this book.
Yes.
They've got to go lick their wounds. They've got to regroup. They've got to figure out what to do next. Perfect time to say.
You may find that as your story unfolds and as your characters decide to tell you that they want to do something else in chapter 10,
Yes.
then you may decide that one of the characters, they get tied up in a bow that you hadn't planned to. So why plan a book on them when you decide in book 1 that they don't really need another? Their story's done. I mean, not everyone is.
Yeah.
Not everyone is like I've thought about mine. I would, because it's 2 sisters are in it, but really the sister and her best friend had way too small supporting roles. There's some things I have to work on with that, but and that's just my first book. But I thought about the sister because then I can kind of keep the whole family arc, because the family's the piece of of her doing what the family didn't expect her to do and all that. So that instead of writing a book about her best friend Jocelyn, whatever, I'm not sure I'm going to write it, but I just know, and I'm just finishing this book and it's a done deal. If I decide to thrill my 5 future readers with book 2, I will, I'm going to have more than 5. At least my family will buy it. There's more than 5 of them.
There's 4 of us here.
Yes.
Sasha stepped out, but there's 4 of us here.
Yeah. So it's just like crazy. Yeah.
So,
awesome. Well, this has been helpful too. So
I'll continue thinking about it because yes.
Revelyn put a link into a YouTube about how someone used Notion for set up Notion for their writing projects. So.
Right. So go ahead and everybody save that.